After dealing with several issues, including a brief period of homelessness, I finally got my first house. It wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, a bath and a half, a small yard. It wasn't much, but it was perfect for myself and my cat, Boots. We had survived the worst areas of our city, so we made sure to go into the old suburbs, full of nice families and safety. It was a wonderful change of pace from my previous life, of not knowing where I was going to sleep that night, or where my next meal was going to come from. At least, we thought it was at first. When we moved in, my next-door neighbors arrived with a plate of cookies and warm welcomes. It was a family of 4, Mom, Barb, Dad, Frank, and 2 kids, Alice and Kevin. The kids in particular warmed to Boots and spent hours playing with him. At least once a week, the family would stop by and say hello. It wasn't long before I was babysitting Alice and Kevin, and we were having cookouts/family board games nights. As I'm not on the best terms with my family, it was really nice to have that sense of belonging somewhere. At least, it was nice at first. As the months passed, I realized that Frank was acting a bit more inappropriate. It didn't start out that way, but his touches and glances became longer. Each hug and touch became longing. I didn't say anything to anyone, though, because I wanted to believe I was imagining it. And I didn't really become uncomfortable around any of them. Maybe it was me wanting to believe that I was in a safe place now, without much to worry about. I'm not really sure anymore. As the months passed, Barb, Alice, and Kevin didn't visit me as much, and Frank visited me more and more without his family around. He also began opening up to me more and more about the state of his marriage and family life. How Barb was a nagging housewife who never gave him any peace. Alice was getting interested in stuff like boys and social media, and Kevin hanging out with a gang of what he called troublemakers. I sympathized and offered a listening ear because that's what I thought he was really after. I didn't have a confidant or anything like that during my rough time, and would never wish that on my worst enemy. So I thought I was doing him a favor. I didn't idealize the family at all, but it surprised me that Frank was having all of these troubles, especially considering he carried himself with a cheerful, positive demeanor. Then Barb started changing as well. It started with her making passive-aggressive comments and having an edge of sarcasm. You know Mother Gothel from Tangled? It was like that. She'd make comments about things, about me, ranging from my appearance all the way to how I was taking care of Boots, and then laugh and say I shouldn't take her so seriously because she was just joking. At first, the comments hurt the same way that a stinging fly's bite does, but as time went on, it became more and more painful. It got to the point that I started avoiding the family as much as possible. Why didn't I get out of there, you ask? I had sunk the entirety of my life savings into this place, and I didn't have to worry about where my next bite to eat was going to come from, or if I'd have a roof over my head that night. I had sacrificed so much and worked so hard to get where I was, and swore Boots and I would never go back. My friend called it the sunk cost fallacy. In hindsight, I should have listened to my gut and gotten the hell out of there. It took a creepy experience before I finally realized that I needed to get out of there with Boots, and fast. One night, I turned in as soon as I got home because I'd worked late at my job and wanted to get some chores done the next day as it was my day off. I hadn't been asleep for very long when I heard Boots hissing. Half awake, I turned on the lights to see what he was hissing at and about jumped out of my skin. There, standing in my bedroom, was Frank. I screamed, grabbed Boots, and got out of the house. I ran as fast and as far as I could before flashing red and blue lights caused me to stop. The police officer was kind and called for other officers to investigate the house. Frank was long gone. He had gotten in by slashing a window screen and jimmying the kitchen window open. When the police went to question him, they discovered the house was empty. Frank, Barb, and the kids were gone, having left everything they owned behind. The police kept a squad car in front of my house that night so I would feel safer. This happened several years ago. I still live in the same house, and Boots has gotten old and fat. The police haven't been able to find any trace of Frank or his family, nor did any investigation uncover any reason that he'd break into my house so late at night. As disgusted as I am, I hope his kids have been able to escape. This happened to my family a few years back when we moved into our new house. It's a story that still gives me the creeps when I think about it. We were pretty excited about our new house. It was a charming 2-story home with a lovely front porch and a backyard perfect for our kids to play in. But little did we know, the house came with something else, something we couldn't have possibly imagined. At first, things seemed normal enough. We unpacked our belongings, settled in, and started adjusting to our new surroundings. My wife, well, she's always been a bit more sensitive to strange vibes, you know. She started mentioning that she felt like someone was watching her, especially at night. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just the usual jitters of moving to a new place. As the days and weeks passed, things began to take a darker turn. My wife would wake up in the middle of the night, convinced she had heard whispers coming from the walls. I told her it was just the wind, or the old house settling, but deep down, I could tell she was genuinely scared. But then, she claimed to see shadows in the house when no one else was around. At first, I thought it was just our kids, or even her imagination. I didn't really believe it to be anything. I have to admit that there were times when I felt like I was being watched, or like I saw something move out of the corner of my eye, but I didn't really think anything more of it at the time. One chilly night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoing in the hallway. I grabbed my baseball bat and tiptoed out of the room, convinced it was an intruder. But when I reached the hallway, there was no one there. I went to check on the kids in case it was them sneaking around, but they were both fast asleep in bed. One evening, my wife had gone out for groceries, taking the kids with her, leaving me home alone. I decided to catch up on some paperwork in the living room. The house was quiet, and I was enjoying the solitude. But as I sat there, the silence was suddenly shattered by the most blood-curdling scream I had ever heard. My heart raced, and I shot up from my chair, dropping my papers in the process. It sounded like the scream had come from the basement. My mind was racing as I sprinted down the stairs, calling out my children's names. My hands were trembling, and my voice quivered with fear. I burst into the dimly lit basement, heart pounding in my chest, ready to face whatever nightmare awaited me. But to my horror, there was no one there. That's when I realized that my wife had taken my kids, and I was home alone. I'm still skeptical, but I felt something was seriously wrong with this house. My hands still shaking, and climbed back up the stairs, feeling like I was being watched the entire time. When my wife returned, I told her what had happened, my voice shaky and filled with fear. We spoke to the neighbors, who said there were some rumors that a family was murdered there years ago, but there wasn't any evidence of this. It was never mentioned during the sale, and we couldn't find anything online about it. I tried my best to convince myself that I must have dreamt it, or something, but truth be told, I couldn't ignore the mounting evidence any longer. My wife wasn't crazy, and we had to keep our family safe. We decided it was time to get out of that house before something even more terrifying happened. So we packed up our things once again, and even though we didn't experience anything truly malevolent, the fear had taken its toll. My wife no longer felt safe in her own home, and that was reason enough for us to leave. She describes it like something was trying to take over her, become a part of her. In the end, we managed to sell the house and move away from that place. But the memories of those strange occurrences still haunt us to this day. We found a new home, and we've managed to put that chapter of our lives behind us. But sometimes when I'm alone, I still feel like someone's watching me. About 3 years ago, I started looking for my first home with my wife. It took months of looking through ads, house listings, and applying to numerous homes we didn't get until we finally secured our forever home. The house itself wasn't overly large, about 3 decent-sized bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a backyard that would be perfect for a dog my wife and I had talked about getting since we first started dating. And even though the house was older and needed a bit of help, it was our first big investment, and understandably, we were excited to grow our family in the new house. At the time, I had an 8-year-old son, Chris, who, like most children his age, didn't like listening all that much to his mother and me, and he enjoyed testing the rules on more than one occasion. One of those rules was no snacks without our permission. Now don't get me wrong, we're not strict with my son when it comes to food. We'll always give him food if he's hungry and asks for something to eat. But there are some things we don't let him eat whenever he wants it. And that was junk food, like chips, cookies, candy, etc. You get the point. Junk food was always a treat and not to be taken without his mother or my permission. And for all you listening who are thinking we're being too strict, let me tell you, if we gave my son free rein on the snack closet, trust me, those snacks would be gone on the same day. Anyway, it was a couple of days after we moved into our new house, and we were settling in. I went into the kitchen late one night, and I was less than pleased to see snack wrappers opened and scattered all over the kitchen table. When I called my son into the kitchen to ask him to explain why he took the snacks without asking one of us, he swore that he didn't. I, of course, asked his mother if she ate the snacks, and when she confirmed she hadn't, I thought that Chris was lying to me. I did what any parent who thought their child had lied to them did. I sent him to his room for a timeout and told him he couldn't have junk food for a week as punishment. My son, as you can imagine, didn't like that punishment. A couple of days later, more wrappers covered the counter, and when I opened the trash, I found even more wrappers. I had another talk with my son, who again swore that he hadn't eaten any snacks since he wasn't allowed to that week. Again, I saw his refusal to take responsibility for his actions and told him that he earned another week without snacks. My son had cried so hard that even I felt bad, and although I knew there was nobody else that could have eaten the snacks, considering it was just he, his mother, and I in the house, I almost believed him when he swore he hadn't been getting into the snacks. A week went by, and there were no wrappers on the counters of the kitchen. The night Chris's punishment ended, I walked to the kitchen to get my son a snack to reward him, when I heard a noise come from the direction I was headed. I stopped in place, listening as someone opened several pantry doors before the sound of wrappers opening registered in my ears. I was so upset and disappointed, thinking that it was my son breaking the rules again, so I sped-walked into the kitchen to catch him in the act. When I got into the kitchen, I opened my mouth to speak when I froze. Someone was opening snacks in the kitchen like I had thought, but the person opening the snacks wasn't my son. It was a grown-ass man who was, at that time, chowing down on a Rice Krispies treat. At first, we just stared at each other for several long moments, but after a long minute, the man started running for my basement. I was still in shock, but I remembered I grabbed the nearest weapon I could find, which happened to be my Chris's baseball bat, as I chased the man down the stairs to the dimly lit basement and saw where the man had come in from. He propped a chair in front of a ceiling window and had been letting himself in and out of the house. I always saw the window closed, so I stupidly assumed it was locked and never checked it to be sure. I just never in a million years thought someone would try to break into my home to steal snacks. I locked the window and called the cops, who came quickly to my house. They looked around the basement, and I was disgusted when the police found dirty blankets and a stained pillow that suggested that not only was this man stealing snacks and making me blame it on a defenseless 8-year-old, but he was also living in the basement the whole time we were living there, probably even before we moved into the house. It goes without saying, but I changed all the locks on the windows and doors, had a cleaning company come in to clean the whole house, not knowing what else he touched, and best of all, I let my son have any snack he wanted for a whole month to apologize for not believing him. Moral of the story? Always let your kid eat snacks. Nah, I'm just kidding. The real moral is, always make sure your windows and doors are locked. It takes just one time forgetting to check them to let some stranger into your safe space. And once they do, you'll never feel 100% safe again. Stay safe, everyone.